it afterwards. All right, so good morning, everybody. My name is Danae Wolf. I am the Extension Ed Tech Specialist. And a couple of weeks ago, I think it was Leanne who contacted me and said, hey, can you do a training on creating fillable PDF forms? And I said, yeah, definitely. So that brings us here this morning. We have almost 40 people on the call here today, which is awesome. And now we do have 40. This is meant to be informal, as I mentioned a little while ago. So as you have questions or need help or clarity on something, please just feel free to stop me. You can unmute yourself at any time and just interrupt me. And I will show you a little bit more in depth on that specific topic, or you can ask a question. But we are going to go ahead and just jump right in. And I am going to share my computer with you. And I thought we'd start by creating documents from complete scratch. You're probably in a situation where you have a ton of PDF documents already that are not fillable that you would like to make fillable, and I'll teach you how to do that as well. But I thought it would be easiest if we just started with creating a form from absolute scratch and showing you the process for making it a PDF form. So in the chat box, to make this a little bit interactive so you don't fall asleep on me, type in some things that you might include on a form. Probably some basic things that you're like, name, address. But what are some other things that you might include on a form that you're creating?
The person's contact information.
Yeah, like basic contact information. So we'll just start by typing first name. Now I am going to put lines in here because I think personally it makes it a little bit easier because you kind of have a space for Adobe to kind of say, okay, this is the space where you're going to put first name. So I'm going to also do that with last name. We're not going to do super in-depth information here. I love that Lisa said ethnicity, race, gender, because that is really valuable information, especially as we're thinking about NIFA and our civil rights review and how we're going to collect information like that, especially with like registrations for programs. So basic contact information, we might have mailing address. This is going to be super basic. I'm not going to put everything in here. But I do want to put some lines just so you get an idea of what this is going to look like when we pull it into Adobe. And again, I'm in Microsoft Word here. So you can use a text editor of your choice to create like the basic layout of the form. I think you might be able to create stuff from scratch in Adobe Acrobat as well. It's much easier just to do it in a word processor like Microsoft Word. And then when we go to save this, we're just going to export it to a PDF. And I'm sure many of you already know how to do that. That line did something that I don't like. All right, so let's type race, ethnicity. That's typically on the same line, right? When we do race and ethnicity. And I'm gonna just type in, we do Caucasian, right? Caucasian. What else do we typically put in race, ethnicity? You guys help me out on this. There's like the, Pacific Islander.
It's usually Hispanic, non-Hispanic, and then it's Caucasian.
Oh, right.
There's like Black or African American, American Indian are like the ones on the 4-H pages.
I'm really awful at spelling this morning or typing. We're not going to put all of them. We're just going to put a couple just to kind of show you an example because we're actually going to use radio buttons and checkboxes to create some of these. So I just want to have some like basic template information on here to show you how you're going to go about like adding checkboxes so that people can actually check this. So I'm going to make it super easy, super fast. We'll move on from there and say like class or workshop options. Yeah, so you might have, you know, especially if you have like a series of programs and people are going to be like checkboxing, these are the ones I want to attend. And then based on what they checked, you know, they would send a check-in or whatever. Ethnicity, race, essay box. Essay box is perfect. So we'll just put essay box and we're going to leave a nice big space for an essay box. County office, address. So Vicki, when you say county office, address, are you thinking this would be information that you would just have on the form as like, this is our contact information, or something that somebody would actually be putting in, like inputting text? Because the one thing I didn't mention is we haven't even talked about branding, and I wasn't going to go there this morning. We can if you would like to. In my mind, it would be much easier to throw the CFAES tag on here, throw the logo in the Microsoft Word form, as opposed to like trying to do it in like Adobe. So you would probably put all of your branding, you would put your county contact information, your phone number. So this would look like an official Ohio State University Extension document, and not just some random, like there's no branding on here whatsoever. So keep that in mind. If you need help with like inputting your branding stuff, I can certainly help with that. But for now, we'll just stick to the basics. Is there an option to do a drop-down list? I believe there is an option to do a drop-down list. So we'll just put that in here because I'll show you how to do that. So let's create a little space for it. You might be asking for going back to like county office, you know, and address. We'll just put a bunch of random information. Do you think that's good for now? Is there anything else that maybe you know about that would include check boxes, radio buttons, text input? If you're doing like mailing addresses, there is a way to add like a box where people would put like a 2-letter state abbreviation. So instead of like having them type out, like we live in Ohio, they would just put OH, and you can actually create that. Whether or not you have to do something like that, you probably, you know, wouldn't be in a situation where you would have to do like a 2-letter abbreviation versus just having people write it out like on a line. So now we have like the super basics of a form, and this is way too basic, clearly, but it's just a simple example. So now when we go to file, and we're not just going to file save as a Word doc, we're going to file save as. And from here down under file format, we're going to save this as a PDF. And I'm going to name it test, make sure it's saving to my desktop. And I'm going to close out of, we'll save this as well. Wants to save it to OneDrive, which I don't want to do. So now we're going to open Adobe Acrobat. And does everybody have Adobe Acrobat Pro on their computers? I imagine that people are using this enough that you probably have the Creative Cloud version of Adobe Acrobat. Adobe Reader, you won't be able to do any form creation, but I think enough of us probably have Creative Cloud on our computers at this point. If not, you can request that through OCIO and self-service online, and I can take you through the steps to do that if needed. So I am going to just open up that thing that I just created, that little form that we named test, and now we have it here open as a PDF. To create the form, now Adobe Acrobat has made some changes. There used to be just like a button that was very clear and obvious that said like, you know, turn this into a form. Now it's under, and there might be another way to get to it, I just haven't figured it out. It's under File, Create, and then go down to Create Form. And here's the cool thing. You can actually create a form from a scanned document. So if you have like a printed form that is not in a digital format at all, but you're like, I really just don't want to have to recreate this from scratch, you can just scan it into your computer, and Adobe will try to recognize it using like smart recognition. It'll recognize the characters, and it will transform that into like a digital PDF file. And from there, you can create a form. So that might save you a headache of having to start from scratch in the case that you don't have a digital form. In this case, we're just going to choose this test PDF, and I'm going to click start. And it's going to automatically, notice how everywhere where I put a line, it noticed this is where we need to put a text box. And it even names the text boxes. So it knows that this is the box for the first name and last name, mailing address, etc. But all of these other ones that were very like open and general and didn't have any like parameters around them, like physical, like tangible parameters, it did not recognize that as a form. So if you wanted it to, for here under essay box, we could have like put like a rectangle, and you would just do like file insert shape, or insert shape, it's probably not file, insert shape in your Word document, and it would have put like a nice box around there, and Adobe probably would have then recognized that as a box to create a nice big text block there, but it did not. So what are we going to do about that? Well, let's start with this essay box, and then we'll come back to the radio buttons for the race, ethnicity. Over here, there should be a top menu. And one thing I failed to mention is that I'm on Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat for Mac. So depending on what type of your computer you're on, probably a PC, the interface might look slightly different. I've not seen Adobe Acrobat on a PC for a very long time, so I don't know exactly what it looks like. But I have this nice little menu bar up here where all of my different options are going to be to put different elements in this document. So I'm going to click just the T button. This is just a text box. And now I can just click and drag this down and put a text box anywhere. Now notice how you do have some like ruler lines. There's not real measurements here, but there are some lines that will help me ensure that I am aligning that box to the very edge of the text, so it just looks a little bit neater. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, but that's not an essay box, right? That's a really, really tiny little box. So I'm going to click and just drag it from the corner and make it as big as I want it to be. And now, if I click this big preview button over here in the upper right, I have this giant box, but notice how when I try to type into it, it starts typing me like in the middle. It's seeing that as one like single line text box. So how do we fix that? I'm gonna go back to this button that says edit, and I'm going to, you can either double click directly in this box, or you can go over to the name of the box over here on the right-hand navigation panel and right click and open properties. And this is going to open the properties of this individual text box. So you have a couple different things here. You have the name that you can change. You can choose whether or not you want this box to be visible, hidden, visible but doesn't print, or hidden but printable. So I'll come back to where you might use that in a few minutes. In this case, we want this to be visible. So now I'm going to go over to Appearance, and I have the option of changing my font size and the font type. Usually this defaults to auto, so an automatic font size, which means that it will automatically size the font depending on how much text you're typing in and how big that text box is. So if I clicked on this first name one over here, notice how it says auto. So if I typed in my first name, Danae, it's gonna fill that box because that's a fairly short name. But if I typed in like a really, really long name, it would automatically resize to be a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna click back on the essay box so that we're ensuring that we're editing the properties for the essay box. And then you can change the position. I think it's under the options tab is what we're gonna focus on. So right now, it does not allow me to type multi-line. So that's what we wanna select, is this is gonna be a multi-line box. And then I'm also going to unselect scroll long text, because if I'm scrolling the long text, it's going to scroll off the page. And if you're printing this form, what that means is that you're going to end up with text that does not get printed. So I'm going to unselect the scroll long text. You can keep your check spelling on. I think that's a good idea. You can choose where you want your alignment, whether it's going to be left, center, or right. We're going to keep that at left. And I don't think we need to do anything with actions, format, validate, or calculate. So calculate, if you were doing, like if you wanted to get into like a numbers game and you needed to calculate different things, you could play around with that. So for now, we're gonna close this. I'm gonna go back to preview. And now when I try to type into it, notice how it types at the very top of the box. And it's not going to allow me if I type in a lot of stuff. Give me a second, because now it's going to be multi-line. So notice how it's not scrolling that text off the page. It's just going to allow me to type that. I think you can also do, let's say you are creating like an application where people have to answer some short questions and they are limited to a certain number of characters. I believe there is a way to limit the number of characters in a text box. Yeah, so limit number, this would be under options. So if you're like in 200 characters or less, or that's really not much, 500 characters or less, you know, you could say, answer this question in this text box. So that would be a really wonderful thing, again, if you just want to make sure that you're keeping everybody under a certain number. So we'll go ahead and hit close. And now this is what it's going to look like. Notice how it's highlighted in purple because that's a fillable option for you. So any questions about that? Any questions about even like opening your file, like where to do like, you know, file, create form. again, if you're creating something from scratch, it's gonna be of great service to you to, like, when you open up your Word document, if you're doing it from a Word document, to ensure that you're actually taking the time to put in those lines, to put in those like parameters, because once you go to create that form, it's just going to be so much easier, and you're not going to have to do as much editing in Adobe Acrobat, because all of that will have been done when you created it in a Word document. So now we have this option here. We want people to put in race, ethnicity, and Lisa, you seem to know a lot about this. Other people might as well. Are those typically options where you have more than one option? Like you can select multiple?
On race, it's either Hispanic or non-Hispanic, but then on ethnicity, they let you choose multiple.
Okay, so this would actually be two separate questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good to know. So I did this completely incorrectly. For the sake of just showing you how to do the radio buttons and the check boxes, I'll go ahead with this. But yeah, keep in mind that these would be two completely separate questions. So let's say you had a question where you can only select one or the other, right? So in this case, you would select Hispanic or non-Hispanic. You're going to select a radio button for this, because that means the radio buttons, you can only select one option. So if I select this little circle up here, this radio button, I'm going to select it, and it's going to give me a little, what looks like a square, but it's actually going to turn into a circle once I place this. You could place it before or after. So if I wanted it to be before, I would have indented the Hispanic, non-Hispanic option, so I could have put it on the left-hand side. In this case, we'll just put it kind of right next door here. I'm going to place one. Now this little box appears, and notice how there's a warning that says there's only one button in the group and at least two buttons are needed. So now I have the option to add another button, and I'm going to select that, and I'm going to place it right here, and this becomes an either or option. So now when I preview this and I go to answer this question, I would select one or the other, and you could add as many options as you wanted. So let's say people were having to select a meal, for example, and you had 4 or 5 options for different meals they could select. You would make a radio button, and they would be able to select one of those options when they registered for a program. So it's as simple as that. But now let's say we're talking about ethnicity, and it would be, you would have Caucasian, Black, African, you have a whole host of different options, in which case people could select more than one. You would add a little checkbox, and now people can select multiple checkboxes. So let's pretend like I had different options listed horizontally here. I would put a check button there and a check button here and a check button here, and we would have a whole bunch. One thing I don't like is it doesn't really allow you, unlike PowerPoint and some of the other like Office programs and Adobe programs, where you have different grid lines that allow you to align your boxes perfectly. You have some alignment lines here that help you, but it doesn't give you like that grid to know that like your boxes are perfectly spaced. And I don't like that, but you do have those alignment lines that help you to make sure that they're kind of, all on the same like top or bottom alignment, or left or right alignment in the case of like these group buttons. So now if I had multiple options in here, I could select multiple.
Danae, if you were to like create it in say publisher and use the grid lines and put like square boxes or circles in, would it recognize that? Do you know?
That is a great question. I think you would probably have to test that out. And if it didn't recognize them as either radio buttons and I wonder if you would have to actually put a circle for it to recognize it as a radio button and a square for it to recognize it as a checkbox. If it didn't, the thing that you could do is, now that you have those perfectly aligned, you would just place your boxes for either the radio or the checkbox directly over that thing that you've already put there, as it would be like a placeholder, right? So that would be another option for you. And like me, I'm pretty meticulous about like alignment stuff, just because I have kind of a design background. So stuff like that bothers me. Some people are like, it's not that big of a deal. Just make sure that it's, it doesn't look awful, and that it's close. but this actually doesn't look bad at all. So again, you would have different text options in here that people could select. It could be meals, it could be, you know, you get this number of options, but you only get one, or you can select multiple, but just know that there are those two separate options, the radio buttons and the check boxes. Now, I think it was Lisa that asked about a drop-down list. And you can add a list of choices. So here, we're gonna show two different ways of doing this. Let's just throw this one down here. So this is a list box, which I'm not sure what this is actually gonna look like in preview. So you could, it's actually not giving me any options to edit that. So I'm not sure, let's see. Add a list of choices, add list options, oh, from the properties. So let's place this and go to properties. Options, so here would be your item list that people would be able to select from. So you could do that, and then you could also add, slightly different, a drop-down menu, in which case it's gonna take up far less space on your form. And then under options, you would actually put your individual item. So let's say it's like a meal item. So meal 1, add, meal 2, add, meal 3 option, add. We'll close this, we'll preview it, and now I can select any of those options. So that's how you would do a drop-down menu. And you might find that useful for different reasons. So what else did I want to show you in here? Let's go back to edit. You can add a form to, or I'm sorry, add a placeholder that people could add an image. And I'm not sure if this is like, let me go to properties. I'm not sure if this would be like people can add, like you would add an image here, or like people would be able to upload an image into the form. And I'm not sure why you would need to use that, but there might be a specific purpose. So if I close this and preview it, yeah, so this actually, as the person who would be filling the form out, this actually allows me to input a picture here. So let's say you're in a situation where somebody's filling out a form and for some reason, like you want a headshot of them. You could ask them to you know, upload a headshot here of themselves, which is kind of a neat option. I don't think that I've ever seen a PDF fillable form with an upload image option in there, but if anybody has, type it in the chat box and let us know what. So could use to upload an image for tagging in the livestock for fair. Yeah. So this could be a really cool option to have in that form. And it's a really great way then to collect images instead of having to do it via like email, for example. Now, trying to get that image out of Adobe, like out of the form, I'm not sure what that process looks like. Like, are you gonna get a high enough quality image that you can pull this then out of the file and like blow it up and use it? That would be something I would have to look into and research a little bit more. My guess is that it probably adds it as like a very, very like small little image with low image resolution. So here you can add a date field. Can you try and download? You want me to upload one, Ingrid, into the form? And just see what it looks like. So let's see, I think I have some bug photos. For those who don't know, I'm an insect photographer, and I do have some photos on here. Let's see. Opening image file as Adobe PDF. So I can put that in here and now it uploads an image, which is kind of silly. Again, you might have a real reason to want to use this, and then I'm not sure if I click this, it's going to just ask me to upload it again. I'm not really sure like how you could then get that out of there and use it. It looks like a very, very small little picture, although the image resolution looks pretty good as I zoom in here. So, sorry, I tried to zoom in and now I've lost it. So there it is. So let's zoom back out. Great for camp health forums where we ask them to attach a photo. Yeah. So that's actually perfect then, because I assume, Lisa, you are asking them to attach a photo so you can like match the health file to the kid, or maybe something like that. Yeah. So that would be actually great, because then you would have their photo like right there on the form, right? So that could be a really, really good option. So you have a little date form is another content type. If we add that, we'll see what that option gives us. List as date. So this is just gonna, ask you to input a date. And you have a couple different options there. Scroll along text, which you might want to change. Actions. So if we preview this, it's just gonna ask me to oh, it actually adds a little calendar. So that's nice too. So it actually adds a little calendar to that so you can choose dates. So you might have a reason to use that. So that's a nice option. And then we have the signature form. So this is probably one of the more common things that we see on fillable PDF forms as an option to sign. And of course, when you have a signature form on here, you can allow people to do a digital signature. You can allow people to actually use their trackpad or mouse to draw their own signature. You can ask them to place a digital signature that they've created elsewhere in here. So you have a couple different options. Once the form is signed, you can say nothing happens. You can mark it as read only. So once the form is signed, this document is read only and cannot be edited any further. And then you could do a script, this script executes when field is signed. I'm not sure where you might want to use that. So appearance, general, I was going to see, I'm not really seeing an option to then sign this. So if I click this as somebody filling out the form, it's going to ask me how I want to sign it. So whether I want to configure a new one, use the same one. So from there, that's as simple as that. If you need a signature for some reason, so let's say you are talking about 4-H camp forms and you need a parental signature or guardian signature, that would be the box that you place for that. And from here, you should be able to, once I go back to edit, if you don't like where you've placed a box, all you have to do is click it, highlight it, and then you can drag it anywhere on this page that it needs to be placed. So it's as simple as that. And obviously this form is a mess right now. This is not a final product. This is a very generic template. So does it allow you to upload an electronic signature image? Let me go back to this form because I didn't see the options in properties for that. So sign with digital, configure new. So yes, use a digital ID from a file that you have obtained as a file. So is that as an image though? I don't know if that includes, no, that's a digital ID file. That's not right. Create a new one. I know what you're asking, Leanne, because that's what I've tended to do. I've created digital signatures before in Photoshop, and it's not a digital, an official digital ID where you have password protected and stuff. It's just a PNG, transparent background signature that I've created, and then I pull it into here. And I think that you can do that as the end user. Because I have done that before on forms where I couldn't get my digital ID to work, but I don't know that that is something that you can do in this editing, when you're actually creating the file. So that's something I need to look into because I'm not seeing any of those options here in the properties menu. So that's a great question and something I will have to come back to you on. So any questions about anything that I've gone over so far? We've just kind of covered the very basics. The other option that I didn't cover was you can add a barcode field to encode data that people type in this form. I'm not really sure. Yeah, so that's a whole separate license that you would need to do that. So that's encryption and stuff like that. So we're not going to cover that barcode field. So just know that that's there for some reason if you would ever need it, but I'm not going to touch any more of that. So that's the super, super basics of creating a form from scratch. Feel free to continue typing questions in the chat box. I'm going to show you a couple more things that I think will be helpful moving forward. Would you go over the text box again? Yeah, so if you need to add a text box, let me delete. I'm going to select Shift on my keyboard and select multiple things and just hit my delete button and delete all of those things off of there. And I'm going to pull in a text box by just going to this T. I'm going to click it and I'm going to just drag it down. So you might just need a little tiny text box like this, and in a case where you might be asking for something like first name, if you need a bigger text box than that, you can, basically pull this and make it as large as you want. If you wanted it to be a large essay type box that's multi-line, like this big one up here, you could make this as big as you wanted. And remember before I said that you can limit the number of characters that people could input in that text box? You want to ensure that you're making your text box big enough in your PDF form to actually accommodate all of those characters. So if your limit's going to be 500 characters, what I would do here is like start typing into like a Word document, like type 500 characters into a Word document and see about how much space that would take up. Obviously, it's going to be dependent on the, the words that you use and the spacing and things like that, but it's going to be about the same, 500 characters is 500 characters. Yeah, actually 500, that was stupid of me to say. 500 characters, if you're including spaces, which I believe this calculates, is going to be the same space no matter what. If it were 500 words, it would be different, but you can't actually do that in properties. So I'm going to show you again, if I just kept this giant text box the way it is and I tried to type into it, it's going to align it to the very center. And this is basically a single line text box that just happens to be huge. So if we want to change that and make it multi-line, we would double click, or you can go over here to this little menu on the right-hand side, and you can right click and then open properties from there. And one thing I didn't mention is once your text field properties like window is open, you can select whatever text box it is that you want to edit. So you don't have to keep hitting like right click text properties. You can just navigate throughout these and it'll open the properties menu for that individual text box that you have highlighted. So you want to do multi-line, that is under options. So you would do text field properties, options, select multi-line, and then I would always recommend unselecting the scroll long text, because if you don't, then it's going to scroll that text right off the page. And if it's a situation where people are printing that form, you're not going to get that information. It's not going to be printed. So unselect that, close the window, preview it, and now I can type in, and it's going to be multi-line, so I can type in whatever I want. So that is kind of nice. Now, the other thing I mentioned is we're going to open up the properties for this first name, and we're going to go to appearance. And if I select last name, mailing address, all of these text boxes have font size set to automatic. And again, I mentioned before that when you have the auto font size selected, it's going to basically resize that font or that text to however much text is in the box given the space that you have. If you would like a more consistent appearance to all of the text that whoever is filling out the form is going to like input in there, you can change this to like size 12 font, in which case, first name and like all of this will be size 12 instead of the first name being size 34 and the last name being size 28 and the mailing address, because it's a little bit longer, being size 14. Just choose everything size 12. And you don't have to go in here and select each individual text box and change it. What you can do is over here in the right hand like fields panel, select the text boxes that you want to change to all be size 12. And I'm just hitting my shift key. I'm holding down the shift key and then selecting multiple ones. And now I'm going to right click, hit properties, and I can change the properties for all 4 of these text boxes at the same time. So I don't have to do it individually. It's going to save just a little bit of time. So size 12, you can change the font to Arial since that's our default. If you want to, it doesn't really matter. Again, that's going to be the default font and text size for the person who's filling the form out. So hit close, and now all of these text boxes will have a consistent look to the text. So Kay asked if you apply specific formatting to the first text box and then add additional ones, will the formatting match the formatting of the first one? That's a great question. And since we've done that, since we've changed these ones, let's go ahead and just try it out and add a new text box. And when we open it up, look at that. It's font size 12. So yes, the answer is it will remain formatted to those details, which is really nice. So you might just, like in the case where you are creating a form from scratch in Microsoft Word, you're pulling that into Adobe, you're creating your form. You might have to go in and select all of those pre-placed text boxes and change everything to the font that you want. And then for anything else that you place, it should automatically change that to whatever it is that you selected. So that's a nice little feature. So what questions do you all have at this point? The next thing I want to show you, it's pretty much the same information, but just creating a fillable PDF form from an existing file.
The other thing that you said you were going to go back over was like the visible.
Oh yes, I completely forgot about that. Thank you so much for reminding me of that, because I was thinking like, why would you have something on here that would be, what were the options? You have a couple different weird options under general, like it's visible, it's hidden. Like why would you have something on here that's hidden, and then hidden but it prints, or visible but it doesn't print? Some of these I don't really have specific examples for like why you would have something hidden on the form but then it would be printable, unless for some reason it's something that you wouldn't want your participant to see, but then when it prints, it somehow like validates that that's like an official document or something.
Well, it could be like a received by date or something that the office would want to.
Yeah, I could see that. That could be a good example. So on some PDF forms, the other thing I wanted to show you how to do, and that's the one thing we didn't cover, is this big button that says okay, is putting a button on your form someplace, and then where might you use that? So a lot of fillable PDF forms, you might have a button that says clear form. So you have like all your data input, and then you, like if you for some reason put in the wrong information, or you need, like you've printed that and now you need to clear it and put in somebody else's information, here's where you could do that. So you would click that button that says okay. Typically that clear form button might be at the top of the document. It could be at the bottom. In this case, we're just going to kind of place it up here at the top. And I'm going to place it here. I'm going to make it just slightly bigger. And then I'm going to open up the properties. And here, I want that box to be visible, this button to be visible, but I don't want it to print on the final form. So I'm going to select visible, but it doesn't print. You can change stuff. Again, the appearance, the position, we have the position already placed. And here's where you're going to put in some information here. So first of all, what do you want your label to be? In this case, I want the label to be clear form, because that's what people are going to see. And I'm only going to choose the label. Now you can choose an icon if you want like there to be an icon for the button. In this case, it's just going to be a label. But you might have a situation where you wanted to put like a little icon of some kind, and then you can choose your icon down here if you have that selected. So the form button says clear form, and under actions, this is where you have to determine what action will happen when somebody clicks that button. So in this case, the trigger is mouse up, which basically is a click. I'm not sure why they call it mouse up. I tried doing mouse enter because I thought that would indicate a click, and it did not. So we're going to leave it at mouse up and execute a menu item. They have a couple different things on here. So you could open up a file, you could import data. In this case, or you could do like a submit button. A lot of cases you'll have like a submit button. Here we're just going to select reset a form, and it's going to clear that. And now I'm going to click add, and I can select all of the different text boxes or options, radio buttons, whatever, that I want to be cleared. So you could say clear form, but it only clears certain elements on the form, not all of them. In this case, it's just going to be all. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click close, and then we're going to go to preview. So this is what the button looks like. So if I have a bunch of information all over here, and I'm like, you know what, I filled this out completely wrong, I can click clear form, and it clears all of the text immediately out of the form. So that's a situation using a button. And it's also a situation where you might have that on there, but then it's not actually going to print on a printed version of the form. Now, if you save this as a digital copy, that button is still going to be there and still visible. So Kay asks, some fillable PDFs will allow the person filling it out to save it with the boxes filled in. Others revert to blank once you save it. Where do you make that change? Oh man, that's a great question. That is a great question that I do not know the answer to off the top of my head. I don't know. I need to look at that one, okay? Because I know exactly what you're talking about. My thought was that if you save like a copy of the PDF, it's going to save it obviously filled in. And I'm wondering, because there's been situations too where the PDF is stored online, and you can start to actually fill out the PDF in a web browser. But then when you actually go to download it, it removes all of that text that you filled in, and you have to start completely over. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. And my guess would be that's not something that's not a setting that you would do here when you create the form. It would be some sort of setting that you do when you add the PDF to a website. I need to look at that though, because I've been in situations before. I've taken all this time, filled out this entire form online, and then when I click to download it so I can print it, everything's deleted out of the form, and it's so annoying. You have to do it all over again. So I need to look at that a little bit further and figure out in what situations does that happen, and how do you fix that. So any other questions on creating a form from scratch? I'm just going to, for a brief few minutes, show you how you would select a form, like another PDF document. Like that's something that's already been created. It's pretty much the same exact process. You're just working from a form that you may have been using for a long time that was not fillable.
Wait, from the clear form, is there a way to like submit and have it sent to like an email or something?
Yeah, so let's try that out. Let's do the button in here. I'll go to all properties. For actions, we would do mouse up and then submit a form and add that, and then enter a URL for this link. So from here, you would put in, if you're doing like an email address, you would type in mail to : and then your email address. So let's just test this out, and it would include the PDF, include the field data, PDF, the complete document. Let's just do PDF, include all fields. Okay. And let's try this out. Oops, I forgot to put a label on here. So it's a blank button right now. So notice how it's going to say use your default application for email. Because I'm on a Mac, it's choosing Mail instead of Outlook, which it should be using Outlook, but it's not. If I clicked continue here, it would open up Mail on my computer, and I would be able to email that form as an attachment. So again, if you wanted to put, instead of, you could, under the label, so under here, under options, you could put submit, or because in this case it would open an email, you could put like email form, whatever you want to put there. And now when we preview it, that's what it says. Any questions about that? So there's a lot of really cool options here. You have a lot of different things that you can do. Basically making your life easier, because now you have like a nice, digital copy of a form. You don't have to like interpret people's handwriting, which I know can sometimes be difficult. But also for the people who are filling out the forms, now they don't have to worry about printing it and scanning it. And, you just do everything on your computer, and it's very easy. For a lot of situations that works. I know, of course, we still have some clientele who are, paper only, and they don't want to do email. So having, paper-based forms is still a good option for those clientele. So I'm going to exit out of this. I'm not going to save it. And now I'm going to open up a PDF document on my computer. Just trying to think of what PDF to open. Do clientele have to have a specific Adobe product to be able to complete a fillable form? So I think they have to have Adobe Reader on their computer. And I'm not sure if there are specific, like if you have to have a new version, like a specific version of Adobe Reader, but you would have to have, in order to open it on your computer, you would have to have that. Now, if you're filling it out online, and then just like downloading it as a document, in order to open it, you would still have to have Adobe Reader on your computer, which is free. You should be able to get that easily if you don't have it. But yeah, so you would definitely have to have Adobe Reader. And I think that's all you would need to complete a fillable form online too. Most people have Adobe Reader because I think it comes pretty standard on most computers, I think. So mobile friendly for tablets and phones. Oh, that's a good question too. I would have to test that out. I'm not sure how easy it is, because I know like on my iPhone, I don't know that I can like save PDF files on my phone. It's a little bit clunky to do that. I think with, it depends on the phone or mobile device that you're using and whether you have like basically an Adobe product or other like third-party software that allows you to open and edit PDF files on your phone. So I think that would be very specific to the phone or tablet that you're using and what programs or apps that you have available for that. So I have opened up just a random PDF document that I had accessible on my computer. Let's just pretend for a second that this is a form. It is clearly not, but let's say I wanted to send this to a group of people and we wanted it to be a fillable PDF, right? It doesn't have to be a form. It can just be a fillable PDF so that now we don't have to worry about like paper-based documents. Same way that we did before, you would just go to File, Create, and then go down to Create Form. And I'm going to click Start and notice what happens here. So even though I have these nice little boxes, it only puts in boxes for basically the first column. And then for programming, for whatever reason, it creates this like big, huge box. I'm not sure what Adobe was thinking when it created this. Clearly there was a reason why, but let's say I want each individual box that I have created in a Word document to have a fillable box in my Adobe document. You would have to just put in individual text boxes in each one of these things. And you should be able to, if I select this, and I think I can just do copy and paste. That way they're all the exact same size. Now I've run into situations before when copying and pasting boxes, when I go to actually fill out the box, it starts to type that text into every single box that I've copied. And I think the reason for that is if you look over here in your Fields menu, it used to not change the name of those boxes. So every single box had the same name. And if I try to change this, nope, see, it automatically defaults to adding the number 1. So I can't even name this the same thing. So if that's what you want to do and just copy and paste those so that they're all the same size, you can easily do that. And it's going to save you the headache of having to like input individual boxes here. So that's another nice option. And I would just do that across the entire thing. And then, as I mentioned before, when you go to change the properties of that text box, if you want to make sure that each of them allows multi-line, you don't want the text to scroll, you want it all to be size 12 font, you would just select all of those text boxes, right click, hit properties, and then under appearance, you would do, these are little boxes. So let's do size 10 font. We're going to do Arial because that's our default. Under options here, it's actually not allowing me to change any of these options all at the same time. So you may have to do that individually. I'm not sure why it's not allowing me to do that, but it is for all those ones. So I would do not scroll, multi-line, close. So you may have to just kind of play around with how many boxes you can select at the same time. So will it allow you to select the entire first column of boxes prior to copying? Yes, you should be able to. So if I wanted to like delete these ones, and instead of having to do that all separately, copy, paste, and notice how it retains the alignment too. So I can just paste all of that, and that's a much, much quicker way of doing that. And now I've just like created my whole form in 10 seconds, as opposed to having to like manually input the box and then change the size and then change the properties, and that just takes time. So this is one additional way of just making it like super fast. And again, as you scroll down over here in your menu, it creates a unique name for every single one of these text boxes, which is really good because it saves you time. So is everything you're showing available in some manner in Adobe Acrobat? You're on 11, it just needs to be found. Marianne, that's a great question. It's a question that I can't answer, let's put it that way, because I am on Adobe Acrobat DC for Mac, and I'm not sure if there are different options in different versions. I think Adobe Acrobat DC is the Creative Cloud option, and now we all have access to the monthly subscription Creative Cloud. So I would recommend working with whoever in your county makes sense, or in your office that makes sense to have Adobe Creative Cloud installed on your computer. And that's going to get you access to far more than just Adobe Acrobat Pro DC. It's going to get you access to the full Creative Cloud suite, which includes things like, you know, Photoshop and video editing programs, a variety of them. And I know a lot of people are using Publisher, but the Mac, or shouldn't say the Mac version, the Adobe version of that, it would be InDesign, which I know more and more people are using InDesign. And I think InDesign is the standard tool that our marketing and communications folks are using to create a lot of their like templates and stuff. So that option is available to you as well to use. So with that, is there anything that you have questions about, anything that I did not cover that hopefully I can answer in the last few minutes that we have here today? And again, you guys can unmute too if you don't want to type into the chat box.
Is there a way to lock the form or put like a password on it so that like other people that have the suite version can't change it?
That's another good question. Let me, okay. There's probably a way to lock it. That opened up a web browser, which I did not want. There is probably a way to lock it so that other people wouldn't be able to change it. And I know that you can do that like after you place a signature, like once your signature in place, you can make the form uneditable, but I'm not sure if you're not putting a signature on the page, if you can, or if you have to do that by individual, because you can like lock, you can lock that, but that's just from further editing. That's a great question. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to look that up. Having a scanned document to create as a fillable document. Yeah, so Crystal, I think in that case, when I go to like File, Create Form, it gives me the option to scan a document, and then I would start a scan. I would have to be hooked up to a printer, which I'm not right now, but I would have to be hooked up to a printer for that to happen. And I believe, I've never actually done that, but I believe what it does is it creates the paper scan, it turns it into a PDF, and then from there, it will use like smart character recognition, and it will actually like convert that to a digital PDF. And then from there, you would go about the same steps of creating the document. So you would, click create form. It would scan the document. It would place the text boxes where it thinks that they need to go. And then from there, you can edit it in the same way that we talked about to get it to be just perfect. Robin, yes, the recording will be available. Yep, and I'll make sure I send out the link to this. So any other questions before we wrap up? And then I have some things I want to make sure I look up for you all. Things like making sure the document is lockable. What are the distribute and track options? That's another question I'm not 100% sure on, okay? So I'm gonna start. Let's see, I'm gonna stop my share and I'm gonna start to create a little list of questions that I've gotten that I don't know the answer to. Okay, so distribute and track. Can you explain that a little bit further, Kay? What are you looking to do? Like you would need to be able to track like who's gotten it and who's filled it out, or? Oh, I don't know that you can, I don't know that you can do anything like that with a PDF document. So like send out an application out and then track who has opened it. I can look into that. I'm not sure if that's an option though. Any other questions before we wrap up here? Yeah, so Stacy said that would be something that you might want to do through Qualtrics. And yes, if you really need like a trackable system to know like who has filled this out, Qualtrics would be your best bet for that. For sure. And that way you could send it to an individual email address. You would know, did that person click on the link? Did they start the survey? And survey, I mean, you could just create it as a form. It doesn't have to be like a, real survey or an evaluation or anything. It would just be a form that people fill out. And then you could also track and send reminders to people who have not filled it out. But you do have to do that by sending it to individual email addresses, which is why I don't think you can do anything like that with a PDF document, because there would be no way to track who got it and who filled it out. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. If you have any further questions, or you like get to a point where you're starting to create stuff and you get stuck or you have a barrier, feel free to just send me an email, and we can always hop on a one-on-one Zoom or a small group Zoom. And I can walk you through how to do something. You can share your screen with me, and we can do a little bit more of a hands-on thing. I'm going to try to research some of the questions that you have sent me that I don't have the answers for, and figure out how I can ensure that you get those questions answered. Some of them, we might not be able to, Adobe Acrobat just might not be capable of doing some of the things that we're looking at, but I'll figure it out for you and I will let you know. So thank you so much, everybody, for being on today. This was actually a really nice, large group. So I really appreciate the participation. And anyone have any other ideas for training? Yes, please send us. We're actually, our Learning and Organizational Development unit I'll mention here, and we'll be mentioning throughout the next couple of months as well. One of the things that we are looking to do as a learning and org development unit over the next couple of months is kind of like a comprehensive organizational needs assessment in terms of professional development that you need. And we will be reaching out to specific cohorts of positions and people, including support staff, about what is it that you need, and how can we best serve you as your learning and org development unit. So be on the lookout for that. We will be asking many of you to participate, so that we can offer a whole suite of training programs specific to you all and your needs as support staff in your counties and whatever units you might work for across Extension. So thank you so much for being on today. And any questions, just feel free to shoot me an email anytime. All right, so with that, thanks a lot. And hopefully I'll be seeing you soon in the next couple of months.